Hello to you all and welcome to Stewardship is King, How to Take Better Care of Your Donors. If we haven't met yet, my name is Maida Stange. You get a lot of emails from me. I'm the program manager for Newsmatch at INN, and I'm here to help you navigate your campaign, act as a thought partner for your fundraising strategies, answer any questions that you might have, or just chat about Newsmatch and INN. So I'm here for any of that. I'm joined today by Will Warren, who's a project manager with our partners at News Revenue Hub and will be leading today's conversation. Before I turn it over to Will, I just wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. So first and foremost, this, as you might have seen when you came in, this meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available on the Newsmatch support site after the conversation. So I will also share the recording, slides, any relevant resources that we discuss over the course of this conversation via email. So if you need to pop out for any reason, don't feel like you're necessarily missing anything. You will be getting a follow-up with all of the resources that we discuss. We also have a variety of training webinars and coaching opportunities open to your newsrooms from now running all the way through October. So make sure you sign up for those opportunities that best suit your needs. I will drop links to the chat into the chat for those things. And finally, we'll be monitoring the questions, any questions that you have in the chat. So feel free to ask them as they come up. But you're also more than welcome to raise your hand. Will pause a couple of times to ask for questions. So we really want this to be conversational and invite you to share your perspectives and anything that you might be experiencing in your own newsrooms for the good of the group, because I promise you that with 400 newsrooms participating, if you have a question, it's very likely that somebody else will as well. So yeah, feel free to share those whenever you see fit. We might read them out of the chat in order to make sure that it's captured for the recording for folks who are joining after the fact. So you might get 2 answers. So with that, I'll pass it over to Will to get us started.
Thanks, and great to see everyone, including some familiar faces from these webinars or from working together or conferences and all that. And I'm excited to talk to you all about stewardship and taking good care of the people who join you in doing the work. To start, my name is Will. I am a senior project manager at the News Revenue Hub, and I work with a bunch of newsrooms all over the country and of all different sorts and sizes on helping them build sustainable business models, either in the form of directly fundraising or more indirectly in terms of growing your audiences that become loyal and lead to sustainability, and in some cases both. And that's really what the hub is all about. We're a nonprofit newsroom, or excuse me, not a nonprofit newsroom. We're a nonprofit that serves newsrooms of all sorts in your search for sustainability and to sustain the public's access to good, high quality information. One of the things that maybe some of you already use, in addition to the consulting services that we provide and that I provide as a part of the hub, is the News Revenue Engine, which is a totally free payment processor that allows you to collect donations from your audience and report on that, and that is all available at the free level. And then there are other features like integrations with MailChimp and so on that you can use to really not only just collect revenue from your audience, but unlock some of the communication abilities and insights that are necessary for all aspects of this work, but including stewardship, which is what we're here to talk about today. So we're going to talk about first why stewardship matters and why you should do it. I imagine that everyone's to some extent bought in on that if you're here, but I think it's still worthwhile to talk about it because there are several different reasons why I think that stewardship matters. And then I'm going to make kind of the case for a sliding scale of stewardship, and to get us away from all or nothing thinking about what stewardship looks like, because I know that there's no one size fits all approach that works for anything in nonprofit news. And we'll look at some examples of how you can apply those ideas, and then talk about some tips. And I imagine that we'll have questions at the end, but all throughout this as well. And like Maida said, please, put questions in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand or just you can interrupt me. That's okay too. And with that, we'll get started. So, like I said, I imagine that people are bought in on stewardship, but there's three reasons why I think it's something that should be a part of your, not even just the daily practice of your newsrooms, but the culture and the ethos of it. First and foremost is, and I truly believe this is it's the right thing to do. There are business reasons to do it, but independent of those, these are people who are volunteering their hard-earned money to join you in your mission and in doing the work that you're setting out to do. And I just truly believe that the right thing to do is to thank them and to take good care of them. And as mission-driven organizations, I'm sure that you will all agree with that, and that having more, more people working on the work that you're doing is something that feels valuable and important. And letting them know that that's the case is it should be a part of your whole cultural identity. It also on the business side, like I said, there are some business reasons for stewardship as well. It drives renewals. It's far easier to renew an existing donor than to convert a new one. And so if you are consistently taking care of, communicating, thanking, soliciting feedback from, and responding to, and all the things that we'll look at as examples from your existing donors, it makes it much easier to renew them if they don't hear anything from you other than, can you please give us some more money, or your gift is up for renewal, or we charged your gift last month, or whatever it is. So it's much easier to renew these folks in general, and even more so when you take good care of them. And it also drives other forms of engagement. We've seen that donors in general can participate in your organization and your work in a lot of different ways. And these often represent the most engaged people in your mission and in getting the most value out of what it is you do. And these people can serve as advocates, as fundraisers on your behalf. They can volunteer. They might make additional donations on top of whatever the one is that qualified them as a donor. But all of that is really not possible without having a relationship with them and asking them and being able to ask them to do those things and take those steps. So those are, to my mind, three of the important reasons why you should practice good stewardship and what the value of it is. I'm sure that other people, and maybe you can drop them in the chat if you have other reasons why you think it's important to create these relationships with your donors. And so I, to this point, really want to sort of advocate for adding another step conceptually to the funnel. I imagine that if you've been on one of these webinars with us, you've seen the funnel before, and probably none of us have escaped a conversation about the funnel of how an audience member moves from a place where maybe they aren't familiar with your newsroom at all to one where they're becoming loyal and returning and developing a habit and a sense of loyalty to the newsroom. And then ultimately that culminates in some sort of voluntary donation or membership. And newsrooms, I find, are oftentimes, for a good reason, very focused on these three steps of the funnel, getting more people to be aware of them and at the top, and growing, the people who are getting value out of their journalism, the number that are becoming loyal, and the number that are giving. And then they can tend to sometimes either not neglect, but just not pay as much attention to folks once they're in that membership bucket as they did when they were moving them toward it. And so I really want to advocate for thinking about stewardship as the fourth step of this process by which a reader moves from an unknown to a member. And as with every step of the funnel where you have metrics that you can look at to say, are we doing well at this or not? You do for stewardship as well. Some of the, I guess, hard KPIs that you have are your renewal rate, how many people who gave to you in the previous year give again. The average gift size, like I said, we see that donors that are stewarded well are more likely to give again. And so does the average gift that they are giving increase, and or does the amount that they're giving over the course of the year. They might make multiple $50 gifts, for example. Is that increasing as well? And then you also could map on some like maybe softer KPIs about the feedback that you get from donors, the response rate to emails and things like that. That are metrics of the engagement, the relationship that you're building. But I really want to advocate for thinking about this as the next step of the funnel and not something that is separate or siloed away from it. I think it's a part of it. It's the final step, and it's really more of a loop because stewardship never ends. And like I've said, I alluded to, what this has looked like in practice is that really the sector, but for hub newsrooms, that the number of contributors over the past few years is not necessarily increasing, but the revenues and average gift and average household giving are. And this just shows what is possible when you're taking good care of your donors. Just putting some numbers to what I've been saying, that they do give more, they renew at higher rates, and that they're willing to make multiple gifts throughout the year, is just another thing that's possible as a function of good stewardship. Any questions about what we've talked about before as we move into more of some concrete examples of what stewardship looks like? No? Sounds good. So, like I said, I find when I talk to a lot of newsrooms that it's really easy to fall into sort of all or nothing thinking when it comes to stewarding donors. We might all have a conception of what stewardship looks like, and it might be informed by things that are really high visibility and high effort, like a gala or personal meetings with people. And when that's your conception of what stewardship looks like, if that's not something that feels possible for you, either from like a cost or a bandwidth perspective, that it can feel like it's sort of alienating and that you can't steward your donors at all, and that newsrooms sort of move into a space where they're not. And obviously that's not the case. I think we know that's all not the case, but it's valuable to say that really there's a whole spectrum of activities of stewardship that range from having a major donor over to your house for dinner, to sending a thank you email after someone makes a donation. And all of those count, and you can, depending on where you are in your organization size, bandwidth, technology, all of these factors can contribute to what it is that you are able to undertake as stewardship. But I think that there's something that every newsroom can be doing, and probably more than one something that every newsroom can be doing, to move the needle forward on how you're interacting with and forming relationships with your donors. So are some of the examples, and we're going to go into each of them, so I won't talk too much here, but we're going to talk about thank you messages and communications, content that's exclusively for donors. We'll talk about things you can do in newsletters and on your website, physical goods, events, and then like surveys and listening. So thank you messages are one of the, I think, easiest and biggest things that you have an opportunity to steward your donors. I imagine that for all of you, after someone makes a donation to you, they get some sort of a receipt. And even that is a touch place for stewarding your donors. I didn't want to include what I consider like a bad receipt because, I didn't want to do that. But I think we all know the ones that we're talking about. It says like, invoice, thank you for your donation of $100, the end, right? And that's it. There's nothing. It's just very transactional. And even this one from a local nonprofit I live in DC, in my neighborhood, surely is automated, and there's not much more to it than that. But it's already more personalized and is helping them, and is telling the story that they want me to know about them and what my donation in support of them does for them. And all that stuff about like how much the donation was and what their tax ID is, that's all below this screenshot, but they're using this as a touch point that they have with every donor to tell the story that they want them to know. And this is something that obviously newsrooms can and should do as well. So just looking at that alone as a touch point to increase the storytelling and the gratitude is a great first step. A lot of newsrooms will take this sort of another step forward with something that is separate from the receipt, which can be sort of inherently transactional. These can be a thank you email that you send. Some newsrooms have a whole automation so that when someone makes a new gift or becomes a donor for the first time, they get not only one email, but that thanks them, but several emails. They might get a survey distributed that way. We'll talk about surveys in a minute. An anecdote that I often share is that when I was a membership director at a local newspaper in DC, I had an automation like that, and I actually extended my calendar to everyone who became a member if they wanted to meet with me. And I know that for many people that doesn't feel realistic, so that's not the takeaway of this, that you have to do that, although it's obviously one activity you could take. But one piece of feedback that I heard from these donors was that they didn't really know what their gift did, and that really surprised me, because I was like, well, why'd you give us this money if you don't know what it does? But I wrote a whole message that I added to this automation that went out after people made a donation, and it was, I think the subject line was like, what your gift does for us, and it listed all the things that these donations do. And then I never got that feedback again of people not knowing what this gift did. And so this is a way that you can sort of set up and then not have to engage with too frequently, if it's an automation or just a single email and a receipt, that is a way that you can really tell this story and express your gratitude to donors. And this is, I think, a pretty low lift and scalable way to do that. Some other examples of this, we have newsrooms that do, they'll send either handwritten notes in the form of a postcard or physical mail, and that might be the letter that's longer than a postcard, or they might send like their impact report or something like that to folks who they have the addresses for. Some newsrooms will even make phone calls as well. And obviously there's different levels of effort that go into all of those. So it may not be that every single one of those is applicable to your newsroom or to every donor in your newsroom. When we talk about major donors, we'll talk a little bit about how the strategy and the approach differs for them. And those might be folks where you're going to call a major donor, but everyone else gets the automation or something like that. But these are all touch points that are really readily available to you all to start to thank your donors and form that relationship with them. Any questions there? No. So donors only content. One is sort of an exclusive thing. It can be a way that they feel like they're getting something special, that as a token of your gratitude for their donation. And then within these, so oftentimes this will be like a donors only newsletter that goes out monthly or quarterly or something like that. These are opportunities to thank your donors, to draw a connection between their gift and the work you do. When I wrote these, when I was in in this membership role, every story I'd be like, we've produced this important, impactful piece of reporting, and it wouldn't have been possible without your donation. Thank you again. And just ways to help them connect the dots between what they're doing and the work that you're doing, because you really are doing it together. And it's also a place where you can share like personal news or news about the organization, the ways you're approaching things, new hires, awards you win, things like that, that bring them inside the fold and that help them sort of share in the successes of your organization are powerful ways to steward these donors. And I like this especially because again, it's pretty scalable, right? This is something that can go out to all donors, and maybe again you have a slightly different version for major donors, but this is something that, especially because you can do it on a cadence that works for you. You can do it monthly. If that doesn't feel realistic, you can do it quarterly. You could do it every other month. I have newsrooms that are doing all of those cadences. I have some that do an annual report. So anything is better than nothing in this case, and that there's something that I think can fit into every newsroom and is another opportunity to tell your story and to form a relationship with these donors. Um, yeah, not collecting phone numbers. Yeah, and that obviously is a blocker to making phone calls. Um, and this is, you know, me putting on more of the like conversions hat. The more things you're trying to collect at checkout, you know, you're introducing a little more friction. I think for the majority of the newsrooms I work with, the phone number is optional, so they don't have that for every newsroom, or excuse me, for every donor. So I think that that is certainly something you could build to, especially if you feel you've exhausted every other stewardship mode and opportunity. You could then try to work on getting phone numbers, and you could also try to collect them after the fact, especially for major donors if you want to forge that relationship with them. And I mean, we're getting a little off topic here, but I would, when reaching out to those people, I would ask them, you know, what's the best way to contact you? Like, how do you want to be contacted? Not, don't just assume that everyone wants a call. Or I work with a newsroom and they have a few donors that are very big environmentalists, and so they never want to receive a physical piece of anything. So even though they would qualify to get the annual report mailed to them, they don't get it because this newsroom knows they don't want to get mail. So really, especially when someone's a major donor and it's sort of financially worth it to spend effort to learn that much more about them, communicating with someone in the way they want to be communicated with is really valuable. Coming back to some sort of smaller scale things, other touch points you have with these folks are in your newsletters and on your website. If your technology allows for it, you can use conditional language to show one message to donors and one message to non-donors. So that's something like in this example here from the Nevada Independent that we do. So the donors are seeing this message that's thanking them, and it is asking them to make an additional gift. But you could put any message there. It could be purely an expression of gratitude and not an appeal as well. And then non-donors are just seeing something that's asking them to give. And if that's not possible for you technologically to, like, you know, send two different versions of it, you could still put a message at the bottom that says, to our donors, thank you for making this newsletter possible. If you want to join them in doing this work, you know, donate here. And so you're still telling, expressing the gratitude, forming that relationship with your readers in a place where they come a lot and where they're getting some of the most value that they get out of you in the newsletter. Everything I just said applies for the website as well. Again, if your CMS allows it, you can show different messages to different audiences based on if they are or not donors. And if that's not possible, you could do something similar where you have language that's sort of trying to cover both of those spaces. And it can go beyond just gratitude as well, especially in a newsletter. This could be a space where you are just trumpeting, you know, a great investigation that your reporters that your donors made possible, an event that's exclusively for them that's coming up, a survey you want them to take, just something you want them to know. These are all spaces where you can share that kind of information. For physical goods, I think it's important to talk about it because I know that's something that a lot of people think of in the context of stewardship. And it can definitely be a nice way to thank donors, sending something like a sticker. But it's really important as you're considering this as a part of the spectrum of stewardship that this comes with a lot of costs and burden. I can especially speak to this because for a long time I had all the tote bags in my closet and I had to mail them out every week. And I mean, that just takes time, and obviously it costs money to print them and sell them, or to print them and send them. And we've seen decreasing interest in swag from our newsrooms over the last 5 years. So while it can be something that, when we do surveys with them, so while it can be something that is either motivational to get people to give or is a way to thank donors for giving, it's not usually the thing that there's the most demand for, but sometimes it's the thing that newsrooms gravitate toward first. So I think it's important to be like cognizant, I guess, of these dynamics. If you are intent on doing this, I would especially first look for either things that that there's explicitly know that there's demand for, and or things that don't require sizing and are really easy to mail. So something like a sticker where you can put it in the same envelope and the same postage and it goes everywhere, versus a t-shirt where you have to ask someone what size they are and maybe they do or don't respond, and then you have to put it in a different size package from the tote bag that you're also giving away. So if this is something you want to do, starting small is really valuable as well. Events are another thing, and as you can see, we're sort of moving up in the effort scale of these. Is another thing that you can do, and there are a lot of different formats that these events take, and I think this is another great place where it doesn't have to be like black tie gala, right? There's a lot of things that are going to check this box of stewarding your donors that are a lot lower lift than that. Events can be in person or virtual. New Jersey Spotlight News does member coffees every month, where they have their founding editor and then someone else will just sort of be in conversation about what the news is, and they are just opportunities for them to thank them, to talk about the editorial process, the journalism, and just create a dialogue and a real relationship with the newsroom. You can also look for opportunities to do some stewardship of your donors at events that you already do. Advance notice of events is a great example of this, where you're already doing the event, you're just emailing your donors a little bit earlier that it's happening. You can have a drink ticket at an event that you're already doing, a meet and greet before you have like a panel speaker. Members can have opportunity to ask questions of these people. There's a lot of ways to bring your donors into the fold and have this be an opportunity for them to form this relationship with you and for you to thank them without necessarily standing up a whole new thing for them, although that can be really effective as well. I saw a question about decreasing interest in benefits of providing swag. So we do audience surveys with the newsrooms we work with every year. And one of the questions we ask is, I don't know exactly what it is verbatim, but it's like, if we, what would motivate you to give to this organization? One of the things that people can say is swag and benefits. And over the last 5 years, it was always low, the number of people who said that that's what would motivate them to give. But over the last 5 years, that number has decreased even more over time. So there's just been less demand, or fewer people in these audiences saying that that's the thing that would motivate them to give. If we routinely have charged events and courses, can we offer them free of charge to donors? If so, what are the tax and legal implications? I think we can probably follow up with an answer on the tax and legal implications. That's not something I can speak to. I don't know if Maida, you can speak to that. But I definitely have newsrooms that will give donors free access to events that are like otherwise ticketed, or discounts, or things like that. And the thing that I would be mindful of here, and Maida, I don't know if you had a thought here as well. The thing I would be mindful of is that oftentimes your donors are the most engaged folks, and therefore also the most likely to be buying things like courses and attending events. And so you just want to make sure that you're not gutting a revenue stream. Well, I think it'd be obviously an incredibly powerful way to express your gratitude to these folks. You do want to make sure that you're not removing 80% of the paying attendance or something like that. So that would be the thing I would be cognizant of. And unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to the legal implications of it.
Yeah, nor can I, but I would underscore one of Will's earlier suggestions, which is to give your donors an opportunity to engage with the event in a different way. So if it's a panel conversation, maybe you source questions from that donor base or something like that. So you're still engaging them without the workaround that might of like a free ticket that might undercut your own fundraising capabilities. I also wanted to pause here for a minute to see if anybody had any donor stewardship events that they have hosted or thinking about hosting, just because I think that having kind of some tangible examples can be really good inspiration for other newsrooms. And I guess I can get us started by sharing that one of the donor stewardship events that I have been most excited about as a donor is group volunteering. So our network of I give to a newsroom in my city. One of the opportunities that they send to me on a monthly basis as a donor of that organization is an opportunity to go volunteer with another organization with other donors for an hour a week. So I thought that that was a really good way to kind of it's mutually beneficial, right, to our ecosystems, nonprofit organizations, but B, it's a really interesting way for me to get to engage with the other donors and the newsroom itself. So yeah, I just wanted to see if anybody had any other stewardship events that they have been excited about or are thinking about. And you can drop them in the chat or come off mute and just shout them out. I'm going to read Charlotte's out loud. She says they're going to attempt to host a get together at a board member's house for key donors, and herself, she's the executive director, in order to promote and reinforce relationships, which is great. We have had, that's a great way to have really deep touch points with donors, inviting them into a board member's house or an ED's house, something like that.
This is Alicia from MinPost. And so at MinPost, we have 5 events in a year where 3 of them are in person, 2 of them are virtual. And we worked with our partnerships person to also have a sponsor for these events. And so what happens is that the 3 in-person ones are first sold to open to our members for free as a benefit. And at these events, we typically go to a local brewery or restaurant, and we'll provide light appetizers for them. Drinks are on them. Like, they know this, that like food will be provided, drinks are not. And usually we work with our editorial team to have it on certain topics that are really interesting to our donors. So often we do a lot of state government coverage. So usually we'll either highlight what's coming in the session, or what happened in the latest legislative session, and we source comments and stuff from our members. So it's stuff that they're very involved with. And then usually these are capped around 120 people is usually, so it's pretty small. But if for some reason we don't quote sell out to our members within 2 days, we do open them to the general public for tickets for $10. But almost always our members love these events. And what's really great about it is, like, we do see some of the same people, but as we change the topics for these events, we actually do see a lot more variety of people. Like, we did one on local, like, downtowns and stuff in the Twin Cities area. And so that saw more of like an urbanist kind of person versus a state government person. So it was kind of interesting. And then we just always survey them to see if they liked the topic and what they thought about it. But our members seem to really like it.
Yeah, amazing. I love engaging your editorial staff to get involved in those, and which allows you to kind of diversify the topics, as well as if you, through your stewardship, through surveying, you're likely getting a sense of what your donors are prioritizing in terms of your topical coverage. So that could be a good way to help kind of inform what conversations you're pursuing. We are getting some really good suggestions in the chat, so I'm going to just read those out. So we have a free breakfast where a few different staff members do a presentation, and then donors get swag as they leave as a thank you for attending. That's great. Again, kind of giving those donors a peek behind the curtain of your operation and making them feel like they're involved in the day-to-day operations of the program. We're planning something similar to Charlotte's this fall, kicking off our 10th year of operation and working on a 10-year anniversary celebration next fall. That's super exciting. I think anniversaries are a great and natural plug for events, both for your donors as well as for your general audience. That's a really good way to engage more than just your central donors and convert your audience members into donors. So that sounds like an exciting opportunity. some people have had a little success in having a donor hosting an event at their home. It helps for their friends and family to hear why they support us. There's often a speaker at the event talking about a topic important to the host and is a natural fit for our organization. I think that's a really key point. Leveraging those personal connections. So whether it's a donor, a board member, to your point, people are more likely to support organizations that their friends and family are stoked about. And so that's a really good way to get people engaged. Oh, this one's fun. We've had a used vinyl record sale, and there's always a line outside before it even starts. We give members early access to the sale. I absolutely love that. I think that's a cool way to incentivize your entire audience and get them to participate in something, but members know that they have that little extra get in early card. So I think that's really fun. We have an offer for filmmakers of a documentary who are offering screenings of a film. So that could be a good way to get people in the door and engage them around a topic that they might be interested in. And then an open house event where donors meet the entire team and get to see where the magic happens. Again, revisiting that kind of peek behind the curtain. So I think these are all amazing examples, and hopefully this kind of provides some inspiration for what you might consider for your future donor events.
Awesome. Yeah, I love all these ideas. I need to donate to all your newsrooms so I get to come to them.
Yeah, I want to go to this vinyl record sale. That's
yeah,
amazing.
me too. Awesome. That gives a lot of great texture and color to what kinds of events can look like, and also the one about how I'm trying to read the donor hosting an event in their home is another great example of how when you create these relationships, you can get that level of engagement that goes beyond that they do donate every year or every few years or whatever it is. They can become advocates on your behalf, which is the whole goal, right? For stewardship. And then we just alluded to this, but surveys and listening are another good way that you can learn what your donors care about. You can do that either in a big survey, like those audience surveys I was talking about earlier, in the context of how much people care about benefits, but you could also do it on an ongoing basis. Like, for example, in the automation that you create for your new donors, you can give them a survey that asks them what they care the most about. And then you can do events around that, like some of you have been saying that you do virtual events based on, or not virtual or in-person events based on what it is that your readers care about. That could be revealed preference, but it can also be literally what they tell you. And that's just one way to show that you're listening. But you can share what you learn with them. You can, act on it, and then also connect back the dots to the fact that you acted on it because of what they told you in the survey, telling that whole story that you told us this was important, so we did it, and providing updates on those actions that you take, because that's an important part of this, is not just doing something and guessing that people will sort of like notice, but really helping people understand you're a part of this work that we're doing together, and an important part of it, and we listened to you, and then we did something, and then this thing happened, and hopefully you get to tell that something positive or successful happened because of it.
Can I add one thing that touches on something that came up earlier? These surveys are also a great opportunity to ask your donors how they would prefer to stay in contact with you. So this might be an opportunity where you say, okay, like, you've given us your email address, how would you prefer that we stay in contact? And at that point, like, what's the best way for us to get a hold of you? So just noting that this is kind of the answer to that question of, like, if we don't collect phone numbers, how do we reach out? This could be your opportunity to slot that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been sort of talking about, or touching on, major donors, and what this might look like for them. And a lot of what we've been talking about conceptually applies to major donors, but in different ways. This is a good space to focus on either one-to-one or one-to-few communications, as opposed to an automation or a that members only email that I was showing, for example, because they give more money, and it might be more valuable to understand what their individual motivations for giving are and to talk to them specifically about those rather than just having them be swept up in what it is that you're telling everyone else. And also because the gifts are larger, the ROI can be greater in terms of having a dinner with them as opposed to having dinner for your thousands of members. It might not be possible. VIP receptions, in-person meetings, and things like that. If you don't have the bandwidth to do those at a huge scale, this could be a good place to start to focus. Like I just said, like learning about them as individuals and why they give. One of the things I love about our checkout page is that people can say what motivated them to give. So we, are getting that information for all kinds of donors, but really understanding that more and more for the major donors, so that you can, when you're in conversations with them, you can talk about it. When you do good work in that space that that they care about, you can share it with them. If someone cares a lot about environmental reporting, you're not going to mail it to them, but you can email them the big investigation on the lakes and rivers in the region or something that you've done, as a way to continue to engage them and express gratitude. And then tailoring the messaging for these groups as well can be really valuable. We oftentimes encourage newsrooms to exempt these folks from the standard automations and campaigns that you have, so that you're not inadvertently sending someone who historically is giving you $10,000, asking them if they'll chip in for as little as $3 a month or something like that. And also so that they feel that you value them as much as they value you. The important caveat is that you need to make sure that you do something with this group of people. Sometimes newsrooms are really good at exempting them, and they know that they don't want to bother this group of people in this way, but then they don't do anything with them at all. So like they'll exclude them from the renewal series that reminds them to re-up their gift, but then they don't send a personalized message to remind them or to ask if they'll renew their support of you. So that's an important caveat. You do, like, obviously you have to, it's not just about excluding, it's about the ways that you include and do talk to these major donors, but it's probably you want to do it in a different way than you would with your with everyone else who's supporting you. And then I believe this is the last slide. Some useful tips here. Knowing your donors is really valuable. Like I was saying, if you don't know anything about your donors and what interests them, what they care about, why they donated to you, it's hard to create a compelling and real relationship with them if the only thing you know about them is that they give you $10 a month. And that's sort of on a emotional and topical level, but that also is true on a sort of technological level. Like we were talking about earlier, if you don't know someone's phone number, you can't call them. If you can't distinguish between who is and who is not a donor, it's obviously much harder to steward the ones who are donors. And so really spending the time to get the foundation in place where you know who your donors are and what they care about, so that you can actually execute these strategies is really important. These next two are not true, or not they're in no way unique to stewardship. They're true of just about everything, but making a plan and having a point person or people for the different elements of that plan is really critical. It's very hard to do this consistently and well when it's an ad hoc process where you're like, oh, we did this great investigation, like we should tell the members about this. But if it's a part of your practice that every month you send a members only email, and in that you have a space where you're going to take your most important work and thank them for funding it, right? That's a consistent way to make sure that that's always being delivered. I'm sorry, I don't remember whose name it was, but they have 5 planned events, and I don't know if that's always the case, and you had them planned from January, but you know that you have these certain numbers of events that you want to hit. In that example I was referencing, the member coffee, they have that every month, so they have a whole process around that. And that's just a way to ensure that these things actually happen. And then similarly, I'm a project manager, so I have to talk about it. Like, it really is very helpful if there's a person who owns it, and it might be one person at some of our larger newsrooms who, like, this is a big part of their job, or it might be that everyone is playing a different role in this. And this circles back to what I was saying at the very beginning, that I really do believe that this should be a part of your organizational culture, and that, like, your reporters even should feel empowered and understand that if they encounter the people who fund your work just out in the world, or at events, on panels and things, that they're able to thank them as well. So I think this is a job that everyone plays, but that for discrete tasks, having, you know, a person who owns each individual one is really critical. How are we doing with questions?
We're pretty good. We have an event-related question. So we discussed events largely in the local scope. So we have the question: if you're a national publication with staff all over the country, what would you consider doing? They hold webinars, but nothing specifically for donors. And there was a great suggestion to hold a special members-only Q&A before those webinars. That's an opportunity. I would also say that something like the meet and greet, or the like editorial report out, is something that you could still do for donors specifically on a webinar. So instead of making it in person at the newsroom or at the brewery or whatever, it would be a webinar that you, or a meeting, digital meeting, that you specifically invite your donors to chat with a reporter or your ED, something like that. So that could still be transferred to a digital format and work for a national organization. And then a good question about, oh, go ahead, Will.
I would just add that this comes sort of to knowing your donors and who they are. A lot of the national newsrooms that I work with, maybe not a lot, but some of them they still do in-person things, but they're very choosy about where they do them based on where they have donors and audience as well. So if they know, you know, that they have a lot of their audiences in New York City or something, they might spend the effort to do an in-person event in New York City, even though they are national. Sorry. Continue with your other question, reading.
That is fine. Last question in the chat is whether people have a donor newsletter template that they're willing to share. So we did get one example of that. We can source some additional examples and include that in the share out on the support site. But I will just caveat that by saying, well, it's good to have something to go off of. Knowing your donors, again, is going to be kind of the primary driver of what goes into that newsletter, right? If they are interested in behind the scenes coverage, maybe you do a Q&A with a reporter, or if they're just interested in your coverage, like as it is, then you kind of include links to those stories or something like that. So a lot of different opportunities there, depending on your audience and what they're looking for. Oh, and then a good question about whether anybody has a donor focus survey that you can share. I was actually going to pull, INN has like a full audience survey, and I was going to share that, but it's pretty extensive, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best fit for donor specific. Will, I'd be curious to hear if the Hub has any resources around that, or if you have any recommendations around best practices for what to include in those surveys.
Yeah, I'm working on one with a few newsrooms, or a few with multiple newsrooms, because I guess all the surveys are a little different. I can see if that's something we can share, although they're drafts currently. In terms of like best practices, we try to keep them short. We tried for the focus to be predominantly like editorial, or, you know, what they are interested in, and relationship, not like, will you make another gift, or like, you know, what would convince you to give another gift. And that's sometimes something that I've definitely seen newsrooms where like that's what they want to ask them, and we sort of tend to steer away from those. Those would be the major best practice. The other one, and this comes down to knowing your donors, sometimes they're collecting demographic information in these, sometimes they're not, and they kind of are either demographic and or like, where do you live, that kind of information. And that just depends on what you know about them already and what you're collecting at checkout. So like, for example, for a newsroom where we know, like we have the zip code for everyone as a part of their checkout process, we don't need to ask like, where would you be most interested in attending an event, because we know pretty much where they live. But if that's not something you have and you're interested in events, or you just want to know like how representative is our donor base of the community that we're trying to serve, you might need to ask or would want to ask a question like that around where do you live or something like that. And I think that count or like framing demographic questions, if you're asking them in that way that just described, if we want to make sure that we're serving everyone we set out to serve, the entire city, community, whoever it is, or whatever it is that you serve, is a really good way to explain why you're asking for that information. And you're not asking for it to be nosy or creepy. You want to make sure that you're fulfilling the aspects of what I assume is shared across many of your missions of serving the entirety of your communities. Anything else? If there are no further questions, I guess everyone can go, but I'll stick around until the end of the hour if people have other questions that come up, or that they want to I guess ask in front of a smaller group of people.
Yeah, thank you everybody for your time. And as always, if you have any follow-ups, feel free to send them to hello@newsmatch.org, and we can also process those questions that way too, if you're not much of a sharer. Thank you.